Well, hello. It's Rick here at Last Call. Um, this particular episode is called Evidence That Demands a Verdict. It's really named after a book that came out in the 70s. A guy named Josh McDowell, who I've shared about in another video on another occasion. He was a young prodigy genius and had his whole world before him, and he had been told his whole life that because he was so brilliant, he was such a genius, on par with Einstein and the like, that he would be pretty much able to write his own ticket in this life and pretty much call the shots on what he wanted to do. He could change the world. He was so bright and so on. So rather than decide to run for president someday, or he was still young, of course. I think he had a PhD by the time he was 23, and one of those guys. And I wish that was contagious. Anyway, so he decided the one thing that he could do is to change the world, is to disprove the Bible once and for all, since it's the most read and studied and researched book, piece of literature in the history of mankind. So he did. He set out to scientifically, that is empirically, disprove the Bible once and for all. And that was his life's endeavor. He was going to make that until he actually had the empirical evidence commensurate to the task. And so that's what I'm going to do here. I mean, in principle, I'm going to show some evidence and not prove it either way, once and for all. Otherwise, it wouldn't be faith, would it? But what people don't know is that the Bible is the most studied, researched, and attacked a piece of literature, also simultaneously with being the most read and researched in history. So it can pretty much hold its own, and always has, to put it mildly. And anyway, so science really proves the Bible, both archaeologically, obviously. If you've done even a cursory amount of research, you know that the Bible has been redundantly vindicated and validated, authenticated by the digs in the Middle East and so on. So that's what we're going to do here. I guess I'll just go ahead and dive in here. What you're looking at here on the screen, this particular slide, is a recent discovery by archaeological standards, and that is they found one of Hezekiah's seals. They found the seal of Hezekiah, which is one of the kings of Israel, obviously, if you've even done a cursory study of the Bible. So Hezekiah was at this time the king of Judah, which is in, of course, Israel, and he is there, and they were there in Jerusalem. And it also, by the way, ironically, with all the controversy, proves that Jerusalem really was Hebrew. Many centuries, millennia before Muhammad and all the so-called Palestinians, which is also an invented word, if you've done that study too. So this is also a validation of the fact that that was Israel's home, even millennia before the Prophet Muhammad invented Islam. Islam came even many centuries after Jesus. I mean, he wasn't even contemporary to any of the ancient archaeological finds that have validated all these things, and this is just one of them. But anyway, so the seal you're looking at here, on it you see a thing that looks like a satellite with wings. And I'm going to be talking about what the wise men actually saw, and why the Bible called them wise men. Very interesting stuff, and I accidentally stumbled on this back in '75, I think it was. I was a young college student studying the archaeological ramifications of the Bible, ironically. And I came upon some of the writings of the greatest historian probably of all time, who was, of course, Josephus. And he was the contemporary of many of these things that he writes about, but not all of them. He was pretty much there by our standards thousands of years later. At any rate, the point is, that seal you're looking at, they recently dug that up, has a connection with, you see the 4 different frames within this particular slide, shows the connections between many of the biblical accounts and what was going on in the heavens, that is, astronomically, at that time. Not astrologically, not astrology, astronomy. Okay, astrology is actually a perversion of astronomy and part of the occult that was put in place even as far back as Nimrod, which is BC, which is before, it's antediluvian, which means before the flood. And one of the main reasons that the main reason I'm doing this is because there's been so much information and false information, and then omitted information from NASA. So much going on. We're inoculated concerning this whole P7X or Planet X, Nibiru, Nemesis, so many names on that thing. And but is it real? And the evidence is overwhelming, especially now, because now we're getting actual visuals on the weather cams and the satellites, and NASA's trying to suppress it any way they possibly can. And I can prove that along with many, many others who have already proven it. In fact, many of the people that do this regularly, I'm just trying to help people that are just now catching on. A lot of the people that do this kind of research, they've done it for so long that they forget that new people coming in don't have a clue what they're talking about. So I feel compelled to just kind of help people understand what they're looking at and why this keeps coming up and why this subject keeps being kicked around out there. Now, the graphic that you're looking at here, this slide is also one of Gil Broussard's slides. Both of those are. This one shows that same winged disc that you saw on the seal. That's what it's depicting, is this binary system has come in, which we now know as Planet 9 or Planet X, Planet 7X, Nemesis, like I said, many names. And the Egyptians, a lot of their hieroglyphics and their writings and their art show it. Same here with the Assyrians. And many of the ancient cultures were aware. And now the Sumerians, this is Sumerian. Now the Sumerians are the oldest record of it. All of the ancient cultures, as I said, seem to have it in their art and culture. And so here we have another Sumerian and or Assyrian or Chaldean. So they're very similar depictions. And in all of the ancient art and lore, you see the thing mentioned. And even in the actual scientific astronomical data of the ancient Chinese, who were not into lore, they were into actual astronomy. And they discovered the thing. They knew what was going on. They have meticulous records that are, like 5,000 years old almost. So. And I can't really tell you, I can't really overstate how important it would be for you to go to Planet 7X, which is Gil Broussard's website. And it's become a little bit commercial, but it's not his fault. There's a young man that's kind of got a hold of the thing there. But Gil is very pure-hearted, very And basically, he's a genius. All of his data is based on math, physics, Kepler's laws of planetary motion, and the like. I mean, you can't argue with the math. I mean, the numbers don't lie. So go and check him out. Now, this graphic is also one of Gill's. You're going to also want to go to WSO. I'll talk about Steve in a minute. But this graphic here, this particular slide, is indicative of what you'll find there. Amazing, amazing historical data that this man has dug up, devoted his life to it. You see the top larger frame, that spectrum of the orbit of that particular, you're looking at an orbit. Now it's broken down into the time frame of the reports that came in over time, and in that particular snapshot you've got 1054. It was sighted in 1054, and the Chinese called it a guest star. They had meticulous records, astronomical records, and then you had the Japanese, the Koreans, all this corroboration. You see it in the artwork at that time. Even during the Dark Ages, when the Vatican was trying to suppress it and would, kill people if they even talked about it, you see the artists sneaking, their art, depicting it in their art in a sneaky way in order to get the news out there. That's what some of those, like 1456, you see that one piece of art. You see it in the tapestries. You see it in a lot of the different ancient and or medieval art. The Mayans, they were privy, and that's what their calendar. You see that red, fiery-looking thing around the borders. It's all based on the timing of that thing. Now, another very important place to go to get the kind of data that you really need to, validate for yourself that this thing is really happening. Like I said, NASA is very, very aware and has been suppressing for for decades. And what you're looking at here is from one of the weather cameras. They're everywhere. They're all over the planet. And now NASA can't keep up with blocking people seeing what's going on because of it. And WSO is another place you're going to want to go. I mentioned earlier, Steve Olson over at WSO is astonishing in the way he networks and puts things together. He gets reports and pictures and satellite pictures and video and everything you can imagine coming to him, and he really does a great job bringing the data together. What you're looking at here is that same kind of thing. Here you have images from a Japanese satellite, and on December of 2001, and suddenly in the midst of it, something goes right through, eclipses this the sun that the chronograph, the satellite is picturing rather, and it's just astonishing to watch NASA try to keep up with all the data coming in from around the Earth. And there will be, multiple objects come through in an eclipsing, and they'll just make stuff up, and it's not the moon, you can only have one moon, and it's out of position in the first place. Now, out there among the researchers, there are some that are kind of eccentric, in the sense that they just don't play the game at all. They know what they know. They've done their homework. Some of them are full-blown scientists, astronomers, professional, and some are like physicists. One of those is a physicist, Dr. Claudia Albert. She speaks very matter-of-factly about what she's discovered, and she does a lot of white papers, if you will, articles, that is, on what she's discovered. And the clip you're looking at right now, this particular slide, is a literal picture of a failed star, if you will, what she has coined a stellar core, rightly so. Great name for it. And what she's discovered over time is that these stellar cores, that is a it basically it's a star, a sun, like in principle like our sun, and it has lost its fission, its fusion, its ignition. There's no ignitable material. And so what she discovered was, as you see, if you look closely, the interaction between this stellar core and the sun, there's a plasma exchange. There's an exchange of energy, electromagnetic connection there. And this has become common. It's becoming very common knowledge now, people seeing it everywhere. And by that I mean there are many, professional and amateur astronomers out there that are, they're seeing this thing. Well, even just general observation, people who have enough intellect to go and look at their tax dollars equipment, those satellites out there, you paid for those, and they actually give live feeds and NASA can't hide something that they can't keep up with. And like I was showing a minute ago, these kind of things are actually in the corona of the sun. You see them come in and actually draw plasma. And I mean, there's some amazing, just jaw-dropping interactions between these stellar cores that come in, and perhaps even other objects coming in to get plasma and to get regenerated. Now, Dr. Alberts works very much from a presupposition, an axiom really, just an accepted fact to her. And if you look at all of her articles, you can see there's only one conclusion to come to, and that there is, along with a lot of other people, there are many researchers that are convinced that there's interaction between these stellar cores and our sun, and you can see it. I mean, it's right there on the satellite feed. So, the main thing is, what has that got to do with prophecy? As I stated, I was going to show the correlation and corroboration when I started the video. Here in Luke, you see, it says straight up, and there will be signs in the sun and in the moon and in the stars, and upon the earth distress of nations with perplexity, the sea and the waves roaring, men's hearts failing them for fear, for looking after those things which are coming upon the earth. For the powers of heaven will be shaken, and then shall they see the sign of the Son of Man coming in a cloud. Then they shall see the Son of Man coming in a cloud with power and great glory. And when you see these things, that is, the signs is what he's talking about here, what the word's talking about here. When you see these signs begin to come to pass, then look up and lift up your heads, for your redemption draweth nigh. And so there's signs. You look at some of my other videos and you'll see it's very, very plain. And I'll share some of those other correlations as well. Now, one of the other reasons I'm doing this, obvious reason should be to warn folks, not just spiritually. It is, I think, innate. It's natural for a man to inquire as when things get that crazy out there, as they're getting worldwide. We've broken all the records and all the categories of all the weather. Volcanoes are everywhere. Long dead and dormant volcanoes are going off. Big ones. Even Vesuvius is acting up now. You probably heard about the other big one there, and then Mexico. Everywhere. The whole ring of fire is just belching from the inner core, and my other videos I talk about that. What's going on is the charged particles coming from the coronal holes coming from our sun cannot be filtered by what's called our magnetosphere, and not all of them. And they go into the core, and they heat the core. And now, if you heat magma, what's it going to do? It's going to expand. It's simple physics, logic, and so that's what's happening. Our core is heating up considerably, exponentially now, and we're going to have a bunch of super volcanoes going off. very soon. We've got volcanoes going off all over the planet. I mean, it's like a massive amount of them. And that's just one. That's just in volcanism. We have also had, if you look at any of the graphs, government and otherwise, satellites and even Google Earth, in relation to the seismic activity, it's even more exponential. And again, it's mostly around the Ring of Fire, but all over the Earth. Now, that's just two categories. I mean, now one thing that this new system, this system that's entered our solar system, and as it normally does, again, Gil Broussard shows that Zecharia Sitchin was wrong in his duration and understanding of the duration of the orbit of this system, as was Michael Brown, as is everybody else, just about, and he proves it in the biblical 14 in biblical accounts. Whenever these things came in, God used it, and you can see the correlation. It's astonishing. And one of the things that comes in with it is a debris trail. The main, what they call Planet 9, or the main hub, if you will, the failed sun, is so electrical, so electric-magnetic, that as it goes through space, it gathers an entourage, and it's got a couple million miles of debris behind it. Well, and so what I was going to say is one of the things that comes in with this thing is that debris, and that debris really just translates into a sea of meteors and asteroids. And so if you were to look at, and I'll put one of those up here, you look at the NEO charts now. NEO means near Earth object, and those here again, that's your tax dollars working. Now, and this is a chart. This is an NEO chart, like I was talking about, and this is government. This is your tax dollars. They're keeping an eye on what's going on in the heavens. Well, now we've got so much coming in. If you do even a little bit of homework, you find out that almost daily now, several times a week, we've got major asteroids coming right by us, just missing us, and they don't even see them till they've gone by. Now, mainstream won't cover it. They don't want people to panic. It's just like people finding out that Planet 9, Planet X, Planet 7X, whatever you want to call it, Nibiru, some people call it that. It's got a lot of names. Whether you believe that or not, it is happening. And the mainstream media is not covering it because they don't want the banking system to go down when people panic. If they think that this thing's going to hit us, then a lot of folks will just give up and go into anarchy, and that's not necessarily true, but they don't want to gamble with it, and they've been lying so long now they're in deep, and I mean deep. But so here on this chart, what you've got is measurements of distance. You got AU and L. You've got that is, you have solar distance and distance from us to measurements from us to the sun and from us to the moon. And so lately we've had 0.1s. I'm serious, 0.1s, and that's just the ones they're letting us know about. That's NASA working. This chart is obviously dated, but if you go to some of the newer charts, recent charts, and look, everything's exponential and it's increasing. We're entering a debris trail, and if you look at the news, they're not talking about it very much, but it's there, and we're even getting strikes now. And they're increasing. Fireballs. Be watching for the news and watch the heavens yourself for these fireballs and for meteorites, and for asteroids. And of course, many people who know anything about the Bible at all know that Revelations talks about two main deep impacts that are coming just before the culmination of all things here. And It talks about one is called Wormwood. The other one doesn't really have a name other than a fiery mountain it's described. Now, those asteroids, those deep impacts, are described in Revelations 8, 7 through 12. And I'm going to break this down a little bit here. Of course, it reads, the first angel sounded, and there followed hail and fire mingled with blood, and they were cast upon the earth. And the third part of the trees were burned up, and all the green grass was burned up. And the second angel sounded. Well, before we go to the second angel, let's look at that. What you're looking at there when it talks about the hail and fire mingled with blood, the red that is described in the blood there account, where it uses the word blood, you have to remember this is ancient man with 50,000, maybe 70,000 word vocabulary. We have 1 million words in English, over 1 million, and he had to use whatever imagery he could use, and that's what that is. That blood, that red, is actually caused by the iron oxide, which is a confirmation of this planet that's come in. It's called the fiery red dragon of old in Revelation elsewhere, and you've probably heard of that. And if you haven't, go back and look at what happened in the heavens on September 23rd of 2017. That's the greatest sign, one-time sign in the history of mankind. Just happened in the heavens, and it was the start of something, and I won't go into that, but the point is, we've got that debris trail coming, and that red described there, and the fire, you're going to have what the Bible calls fiery hail in several places, quite a few accounts, like when they were fighting, Joshua was fighting the Assyrians, and 186,000 of them were killed in one day, and it was really a surgical strike. God was using that system when it came in at that time. It doesn't always come in close. That's why we don't have a consistent pattern. Sometimes it comes in close and sometimes it doesn't. And when it comes in close, there's all this kind of stuff, the fiery hail and that kind of stuff. Ice Age and the polar slips, and the Earth tilts from the gravitational and electromagnetic pull, and so on. So there's just too much to go into. I'm trying to cover and break it down for you, but that mingled fire and blood described there like hail is the debris trail. It's going to be like rain and fire. And then the next sentence, it says, and the second angel sounded, and there was, as it were, a great mountain burning with fire was cast into the sea, and a third part of the sea became blood, and a third part of the creatures which were in the sea and had life died, and a third part of the ships were destroyed, and then it goes into the next angel sounding his trumpet. And of course, the fiery mountain is not very ambiguous. We're talking about, again, ancient language trying to describe, an asteroid. So a burning mountain hitting the sea, that makes sense that he would see it that way. And this is a deep impact hitting our ocean somewhere. And it's heavy duty because it wipes out a third of everything, if you can imagine. So that's going to be part of, that's the first deep impact that we have coming from this debris trail that's coming in with this binary system. That's what they're called. It's a binary system. They found out that many solar systems are binary. Some are even trinary. They have other suns, either dormant dwarfs, brown dwarfs, what they call stellar cores, as Dr. Alberts calls them, and rightly so. And they come in periodically. It's just like the atomic structure. If you look through a microscope, you see atoms interacting with their electrons and neutrons and protons and so on, and there's little orbits going on there. It's pretty amazing, the similarity there, but that's another subject. Now, next we have, and the third angel sounds, and here we have another deep impact. And there fell a great star from heaven, burning as it were a lamp, and it fell upon a third part of the rivers and upon the fountains of waters. And the name of the star is wormwood. And the third part of the waters became wormwood, and many men died of the waters because they were made bitter. Now, what that is when you have a deep impact of something that radioactive and electromagnetic, completely about 90%, iron oxide, and with its natural gases we don't even know about. Either way, when it hits, it will turn everything poisonous. Everything becomes toxic when it hits, and the water table and is the radiation and so on. So now wormwood is mentioned just once, I think, in the New Testament, but it is here in Revelation, and it's actually one of these large objects. Some say it is Planet X and Planet 7X, whatever you're going to call it. And I don't believe that. I believe Planet X is huge. It's 7 times our size, and all the data shows that it's between 4 to 7 times our size or bigger. And so if it hit us, that's it. It's over. This is part of the debris trail. Wormwood and this other asteroid are a part of the debris trail. If you look at those charts I showed you at the government sites, you will see. And you can also go, by the way, as I mentioned, to livemeteors.com and actually watch in real time, except now, in my opinion, it looks like they're putting up false data there and loops live. They look like they're live, but they're not showing what's coming in because, again, they don't want people to panic. And I could get into that again, more detail another time. And now, so wormwood hits, and then a third, and then the fourth angel sounded, and a third part of the sun was smitten, and a third part of the moon, and a third part of the stars, so as a third part of them was darkened, and the day shone not for a third part of it, and the night likewise. One of the main dilemmas with sharing what's been discovered and what's being, validated and vindicated on these issues on a regular basis is it's hard enough to get the average person to take you serious on this stuff just because of it's just so over the top, but it's really happening. That's what's amazing. But if that wasn't hard enough, it's compounded. The difficulty is really compounded when you start talking about the biblical ramifications and the confirmations of how it correlates and parallels and fulfills all the prophecies. I mean, like analytically. And so it's kind of double jeopardy trying to share this stuff with the average person because it just seems so over the top compared to daily life. We can believe it in sci-fi movies and we rush to them and love them, but to find out that some of the really weird kind of stuff is really happening in our solar system, that's a whole nother ballgame. The slide you're looking at here is obviously from one of the stereo cores and satellite pictures, cameras that is, of a object. It is an object transversing the sun, and it is not the moon. And so it's not one of our regular planets either. So you've got to ask yourself, what in the world? And this is the kind of evidence that's coming in from all over the world. It's coming in from the very government cameras that they're trying to obfuscate, and it's coming in from, several million observers, and both amateur and professional, as I said. And this evidence is pouring in. Like I said, NASA can no longer keep up and try and hide this stuff. And, if you think about it scientifically, we don't really know anything. We haven't even discovered 90% of our ocean. How are we going to have the answers that NASA claims to have concerning space, right? We gave up going to the moon, supposedly, in the 70s. So, come on, wake up, folks. This thing's really happening. And the evidence is, like I said, overwhelming. Now, I'm going to put up several pieces of evidence here that's coming in, mostly from the satellite cameras and from the weather cameras and from, amateur telescopes. And much of the amateur equipment that they're using these days is so sophisticated that that's the other reason why NASA can't keep the hammer down on this stuff. It's just obvious. And there are sun simulators and all kinds of just bogus stuff that has been going on, covertly. And anyway, the evidence is there. And here's another example. As I mentioned, Steve Olson is just astonishing in the way that he can put things together. His research is sound. He's done his homework. He's probably the most trolled and attacked, one of the most trolled and attacked of all of the researchers because of it. And he even has other channels attacking him because they're jealous or territorial or just puffed up, And I've run into several of those, and I've actually confronted some of them. It's just not right. This is global concern. This is humanity in danger, not some territorial, high school meet you behind the, school for a fight kind of thing. It's just grow up and let's work together, folks. Anyway, sorry for the tangent there, but it is relevant and important. Now, this clip here, this time lapse of thumbnails is just this is the kind of stuff that's coming in. It has been coming in for several years. I've seen this stuff for years now. And like I said, is the average person, I was talking about how you have double jeopardy trying to share this stuff. It's over the top, and it's just hard for people to get their head around, and they're doing their daily lives, and who's got time for that? But another factor that compounds the dilemma trying to warn people or bring people up to speed is the fact that in this day and age, this information day and age, what we're dealing with is too much information. We just, we're inoculated. We get so much every day info coming at us, and it's just too much to process. And men weren't originally intended to be getting that much info every day. It's just not this part of our development, as humans. And people would argue with that, but that's okay. That part's my opinion. It's an educated opinion. But the point is, we're inoculated. We're so overwhelmed now in society with the information highway and just the way things have gone, that our eyes glass over. We see something radical like, oh yeah, wow, yeah, that. And we go to the next thing because there's so much, we just can't process it. And it's like, well, nothing surprises me, And so obviously these thumbnails that you're looking at here is a time lapse, and as the sun goes by, some would say it's a sun simulator, and there's enormous evidence for that. And I'll do a video on that. We found the patents and everything, and several different countries already have them. But so assuming, just for the sake of argument, that is the sun, going by. Either way, it's illuminating an object that's not supposed to be there. This is real, and these are real pictures, so deal with it. Now, periodically there have been NASA employees, whether with a fit of conscience or for whatever reason, and former employees and private contractors that worked for them have come forward and said, yeah, we know what's really going on, and spilled the beans. Well, some of them have disappeared. Some of them died mysteriously. And as paranoid as that sounds, it sounds like a Clancy novel. But, I mean, this is really happening. You do some homework, it'll blow your mind. Now, they're not, they're cloaking, but they're not as cloak and dagger as they used to be, and haven't been for a while, thank goodness. But the point is, you have credible people coming forward with this information. This man, Bart Sabol, is obviously that same situation. And just take the time, stop the video or pause it and read it. Another example of that is found here, of course, in this article from the New York Times, dated in January of '83. They weren't sure how to process or how to get this stuff out to the public, or if they should. And they had already done Cloak and Dagger, and they were, I think, trying to decide how to go forward when this stuff started leaking. In my last video, I have a science book, a very popular science book, where you have an article about it that's even more detailed. Now, in this article, they mentioned something really interesting. There was a man named Lowell who was very early on all of this, and Farada, and there's some of the pioneers that saw the perturbing that was happening with Uranus and Neptune, and that's how they knew the object was there. That's why they sent out the probes. Well, they had started the discovery far before that, and it mentions it here. It says in 1930s, a more serious search of those skies, that area was made and began. They were searching, obviously telescopically, but that's how they discovered Pluto, and just trying to find this thing, this big magnet out there pulling on all the planets, giving away its position and or existence, and it's near absolute zero, so it can't be picked up in the color spectrum, and you need infrared to see it. Now, here in the Washington Post, I think it was the same year, December of that year, of '83, Washington Post had come out with the same kind of article, only they were actually drawing diagrams, because the truth is they couldn't have done that if they hadn't already triangulated it, and they kind of tipped their cards on this one. But I just mentioned that you can only see it in infrared, and that's interesting. If you look at the other article I just put up, let me bring that back up here. This guy, Bart Sabol, that I mentioned, he comes right out with a very interesting observation, and it confirms what I said. The temperature is absolute zero on this thing, and it requires, specialized infrared satellites to be able to be observed, and of course infrared telescopes. And the biggest in the world and the most expensive in the world is owned by the Vatican, and they ironically call it Lucifer, which of course was Satan's name before he fell. Ironic. One of the questions that comes up often with people with any brain at all, is a good question, is, well, if it's that far out there, why are we able to see it now and we weren't able to see it then? Well, it's not only a matter of, obviously exponential increases in the discoveries in technology, and again, the infrared is, we're seeing all kinds of things that no one ever saw before. Even amateurs are bringing in stuff that is it's a whole nother series of videos. just in its own right, but that's just that category. They have, electron telescopes. They have, you can filter with ionic and different types of filters and see all kinds of things. I mean, you look at the Secchi satellite and the pictures that it gets. This particular video you're looking at right now, you probably can't make out the audio, but it's either, I think it's from Jeff P. Go to his channel, Jeff P. And or Mr. MBB333. Both are absolutely excellent researchers, and I'm always careful to give credit where it's due. These guys are just consummate professionals. Let me show that again. If you'll notice, when the sun, he's pointing out the objects, and he's absolutely right. And as the sun, quote unquote, the sun goes by, you'll see that the object is again illuminated after it passes, but then it gets really amazing because it's lit from the other direction. It is lit from the left. That's very important to notice. Very important to notice. All right, so the sun is on the right and it's dark on that side of that object you're seeing, just under the color in the top right corner, which we won't even talk about that. That's part of your debris trail, folks, in my estimation. But now see, that orb is still there. They couldn't obfuscate it. Quite often from Alaska, the sky is so clear and the chemtrails don't work, so they can't really hide this stuff. But look which side it's lit on. That means there has to be a light emitting source off to the left. I mean, just stop for a moment and think about that. Think about the ramifications of that actually being lit from the other direction. I mean, that says it all. What's out there? And that's why I use the word binary, and it's not an original word. I mean, that's the scientific astronomical terminology for a binary system. When they started using it, when they realized that so many of the solar systems out there are binary. It really, and when I say consider the ramifications, I mean really, it's over the top. It's so far over the top we can't get our head around it. But if you do enough research, it starts to make sense, and that's why I'm doing these videos, to bring people up to speed. And now I've gone long, so here's some of the ramifications that I wanted to emphasize in this video, and that is that along with this system that has come in, and it has come in many times, obviously, and sometimes closer than others. When it comes in, it brings all manner of havoc, depending on if it comes in close or not. And as I said before, one of the main things that needs to be addressed is, let me put it this way. The way you tell if something is prophetic, or if somebody is prophetic, or if their subject is prophetic, and prophetic is a broad term here, but it does have the obvious traditional prophetic ramifications. And the way you tell if somebody is really prophetic is if what they say comes to pass. It's not complicated, right? So be watching for the fireballs, as they call them now. And if you haven't noticed, we've already started having an exponential increase. Mexico and Canada and Michigan and Russia, and it's going to increase. Now, if I'm right, be watching, because if I'm right, it's going to increase to the point where the whole world is getting, pelted in the big sense. And so be watching for that. And in the long run, it's going to be, there's going to be asteroids and meteors, meteorites, and on a regular scale. And the volcanism, we're already seeing, as I said, an exponential increase in volcanism and seismic activity. The whole world is tilting. The Earth itself is tilting. That's proven. And you can go to any of the scientific sites that monitor that and see that the North Pole is bouncing around like it's like a fire hose without somebody holding the end of it under high pressure with the nozzle open. It's just going all over the place. So anyway, I'm going to wrap this up. Be watching for the increase in all three of those categories. The reason the weather is the way it is, we've broken all the categories around the world and all the countries, is because we are tilting, and because of the coronal holes sending in charged particles, like I said, to the magma, and it's expanding, and it throws everything off, throws our jet streams off, and so we get we had regular animals freeze in place recently up north. You can look up on that. I'm not making that up. 60-something degrees below zero, and animals running along slowed down, stopped, and froze right there. Wild animals. And so, look this stuff up. Don't take my word for it. This is really happening. And I'm going to do a follow-up on this one and bring out some other ramifications, as I said. And so for now, take care, and more to come. And if you like good blues or that kind of thing, I'm a recording artist by trade. You can go to ricknorrismusic.net, not .com. And there's some blues there, a little bit of everything, and some of it's eclectic, and mostly I'm a blues artist and a vocalist and a songwriter and a producer and that kind of thing. Anyway, to be continued, and God bless you.